This is Linda Cohn from ESPN, and you're listening to the ML Sports Platter.
The ML Sports Platter back with you, brought to you by Axe Exotic Pets, Liverpool Physical Therapy, and Bryant and Stratton College. Log on to bryantstratton.edu. Classes start soon. 2 great locations in and around Central New York, Liverpool and James Street. They just got a new nursing program. A lot of options. Great time to be a Bobcat. Bryant and Stratton College, the official college of the ML Sports Platter. Hit me on Twitter at Mike L. Sports. And, of course, we are all part of the Brawl Network, and you can get me on Instagram as well, Mike L. Sports 1979. And it's Apple, it's Google, it's Spotify, Deezer, Stitcher, wherever you get your pods. Download, subscribe, and make sure to hit that 5-star review, 5-star button and the review button as well. Post a review. That stuff helps an awful lot. Well, I am super excited to talk to our next guest on the platform. He's a friend of mine. He's been in the golf world for a long time, currently playing on the Champions Tour. He's won 7 times on the PGA Tour, and he has 9 total professional wins. An Ohio State Buckeye, a huge Syracuse basketball fan, and as far as major championships, he's got a top 6 in the U.S. Open in 92 and a top 10 in the PGA in 1997. It's my good buddy Joey Sindelar, the Horseheads New York native. Joey, great to have you back, bud.
Mike, always a pleasure to visit with you. Thanks for inviting me aboard.
So let's get my listeners a little caught up with you. What's the latest and greatest? Where you been playing? What's next?
1 minute or less. Last winter, I had a hard time starting up, back problems. Got one of those nerve burns in my back in like March where they stick the needle in and they kind of burn the edge of it. And it actually worked. But then with COVID, we didn't have much of a season till probably August. But I was ready by then. It was a miracle for me. Played the last 10 last year. Then time off. COVID mixed up our schedule at the beginning of this year. This is pretty trite stuff. I'm glossing over a lot of pain and suffering for a lot of people. But as it applies to us on the tour, our schedules got messed up. And so we only had Tucson, I'm going to say 4 or 5 weeks ago. And to me, you know me, I'm a homebody, and I'd rather be watching Syracuse play something or the Mets or whatever. And, it would have taken me 3 or 4 weeks to start up for Tucson and then have 5 weeks off. So I elected not to do that. I've now ramped up. I'm at about maybe 80%. I start next week in Houston. There's 3 in a row. My eligibility will now be, I know 2 problems. One, whether the back injury lays down, and 2, my eligibility. I'm basically out there on career money. And as these young kids, just like it's senseless that I have more career money than Arnold Palmer, because, how much sense can you make out of that? The young kids who also played for way more money, the ones turning 50 now, who played for way more money than I played for, and the guys in my group, were being replaced. And I'm watching myself slide down that ladder. So I've got a little bit of an eligibility issue, but I should play 18 or 20 times this year, I hope.
So what's in your bag? What's the driver? What are the irons? Give me the Joey Sindelar club. Give me the club group here. What's your bag look like?
Well, thank you. So I have had some pretty awesome relationships through the years with club companies, TaylorMade, Tommy Armour. But once you get to the Champions Tour, unless you're one of the first 3 or 4 guys, it isn't a money thing anymore, and it's very interesting to watch what players play when they're not getting paid. In other words, what do they think is just the best equipment? And sometimes that varies a lot. Sometimes it doesn't. So for me, I've got a very new driver, which is about a 6-year-old Callaway something before the Maverick. I don't even know the name of it. My boys will kill me for not knowing the names of these things. I have the matching 3-wood. So just a nice modern-ish driver 3-wood from Callaway. I use the Titleist AP2 716s, so those irons are now 5 or 6 years old. I've got I mix my sand wedges between Callaway sand wedges, which are now Roger Cleveland. Roger Cleveland, of course, was Cleveland of Cleveland Golf, but he's now with Callaway.
Yep.
So he makes beautiful, beautiful wedges. And so I use some Callaway wedges and then also some Cleveland wedges, which are owned by Srixon. So I'm just putting stuff in the bag. Oh, and I've got what do you call that Fang 2 Odyssey putter, the big mallet looking one that just lays on the ground so beautifully. And, if we ever wanted to do just a whole podcast on club selection, it would be a riot, because what matters is not what most people think matters. And it takes a long, even for tour players, it takes a long time to really understand why you should be choosing certain kinds of equipment for whoever you are, and that, I don't match Scotty McCarron and he doesn't match Bernard Langer, etc. So it's a fun story to talk about equipment.
Is Bryson DeChambeau, speaking of equipment, speaking of other crazy things going on, the analytics, the overall technology, I guess, is he good for golf?
Oh my gosh, sure.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. Holy cow. I mean, talk about change the game. Not change the game in terms of beating everybody like Tiger might have, or Nicklaus did, or whoever, Daly in his own way, but changed it from far really can work, and you really almost don't need to look like we all thought a golfer needed to look like, that the long drive components can kind of sneak their way into tour golf, as long as you can, because the driver, you don't need to be quite as exact with a driver because it's up on a tee, so you can use all those power components. But, sooner or later, you got to hit a 5-iron out of a thin lie. And when the ball is laying very tight to the ground, you must know where the bottom of your swing is, so you can place it just ahead of the golf ball. So he's just, it's stunning. And it's funny, I think, I don't watch a lot of golf. Again, I watch a lot of Syracuse stuff, but I don't watch a lot of golf. But I think I heard him say that, or actually I heard McIlroy say that he tried, and he feels like he's in a bit of a funk because he tried to do the big power grab. And who can blame these guys? They're all trying to get better, most of them. And it's just, so what an introduction to power from Bryson. And then the fact that the irons are the same length, that's an interesting equation. They're chasing him for the power ideas. That's pretty cool. But I don't know, and Mike, you would know better than I would. Is anybody else using irons the same length like he does, or is he still the only one?
I don't think so. I think he's the only, because he's messing with all that tech, with all the clubs, and it's not just the distance, because he looks at the analytic part of it too, and the analytic part goes into the equipment and how long clubs are. I mean, he's a junkie, man, with this stuff. Yeah. So it's just if it he may be again, the power thing's not going to go away. The idea of should the instrument be the same size? Sure.
Does that make it more repetitive? That's a really interesting conversation. And I think the proof will be, do guys copy you? Because if it's the better way, there's going to be some juniors right now copying that, and they're going to weed their way out there in 5 or 10 years, and we'll see more of it.
Yeah, he rubs people the wrong way sometimes with his comments. I mean, obviously calling, Augusta like a par 67, which was absurd, and some different things like that. But the reality is, we know that sports are just fine with a villain. They're fine with a guy who rubs people the wrong way. Even Patrick Reed did it for a little ways, not quite to the Bryson DeChambeau level. Here's the bottom line, Joe. You know how this is. As we get closer and closer, and we may be closer than we've ever been because Tiger's accident, which we'll get into in a minute, we're probably closer now than ever before of the post-Tiger Woods golf world. And even though majors will always sell out, and even though people are playing golf like crazy, come on, man. I know, everybody knows what Tiger did for the game of golf and the impact and why it is how it is now, and the purses and the sponsorships and the all of it, the global appeal. You know what? Golf maybe needs a couple of these little jolts as we get into the post-Tiger world.
Well, the personalities are always interesting and fun, and anything. I don't know either of these guys in person, Patrick or Bryson. I do know Tiger, and like from Tiger backwards, I know that group. And I mean, the personalities, there's always been bad guys, and Seve was always known for the gamesmanship and the jingling the change in the pocket, and there's all kinds of examples of angry people on the golf course, or people that say stuff. But so there's room for everybody, I think, and but you're right, post Tiger could be upon us.
Joey Sindelar, our guest on the ML Sports Platter, brought to you by Stanley Law Offices and Barks and Rec Doggy Daycare. Speaking of Tiger, when you found out about the accident, what are you feeling emotionally, and have you talked to him since?
No, and I'm not. Although I know him, I'm not a call him on the phone guy.
Okay.
I would certainly at a time like that, I'd shy away. I was not in touch. He's the times I got to play golf with him. I thought the world of him. He's one of the easiest people to be paired with in a tournament. It's all the peripheral stuff that's very noisy and difficult. The stuff that's aimed at him during the round. But as a person to play golf with, I enjoy him. And my friend from here in Horseheads, Mike Hulbert, was co-captain of a number of Ryder Cup teams and knows Tiger very, very well. But beyond that, saw him in the heat of the battle and what he was like with the other guys on the team. And just, all those guys think the world of him. I mean, so he's a good guy, and it's lousy stuff, and it's light. I mean, in the end, we're all just people doing human stuff, and I guess he was going a little too fast, and so I don't actually even know the extent. What is the latest prognosis?
I haven't heard any. I mean, I've listened to a million shows and read up on stuff. It's just it's just he's recovering. I mean, that's all that people say, and I'll tell you this: there's a lot of people who are writing him off again. He's going to give it another go, Joey.
Oh, no doubt. He'll. Unless I don't even know.
Unless like a leg is just too much to. Yeah, it's just too much to bear.
Right. If it's the right knee, maybe you can. If it's a knee and it's the right knee, it's maybe okay. If it's the left knee, oh my gosh, what are you going to do?
Yep.
But no, But if there's going to be a monster effort given, it will be by him.
Do you think? I know it's hard to go back in time and say, hey, if Michael Jordan, if his dad doesn't get murdered, what happens with Jordan? Does he retire? Does he stay with it a few more years and then go off fully to baseball? Does he? I mean, does he still try baseball and then never come back to basketball? Tiger Woods with the childhood. He was so under, obviously, the thumb of his father and Earl, and I know that his mother was a tough cookie too, but a lot of it was Earl, and a lot of it was his terrible behavior at the golf course as well. Screaming at Tiger, making him into the competitor that he became. But Tiger also didn't have a childhood and didn't really have a lot of fun, and we've read that in the bio by Armin Catane and Jeff Benedict, and we've seen it in the documentary on television. How different do you think, I mean, if you had to guess, how different is Tiger Woods as we know him, just the golfer, if his childhood is a little bit different, maybe a little bit more normal?
Yeah. Can't possibly know that answer. It's very funny to hear you say those words because I came from a very driven father, not in the mean sense, but very driven, very you will, we're chasing this and you'll be doing, and I would never, remember learning golf in the 60s and 70s, it's not what kids did then,
Sure.
And so I never would have wound up where I did. Tiger grew up, how old is he now?
45 maybe? 40.
Yeah, so, we're 18 years apart. He would have grown up, in a bigger city. He may have stumbled on it on his own. And somehow his personality dealt with what his father gave him, and it worked. Lots of times it doesn't. That can blow up. So I can't know the answer to this. It was tough to watch. It's tough. It's always tough when there's a parent that's tough. Kevin Na's parents are known to be very much in that vein. I did not, Michelle, we come from a little bit of that.
Yes,
or maybe
tons of it.
From a management side.
Yep.
So there have been some successes, but we certainly don't know the failures of parents that cracked the whip pretty hard, and they never got there, so we don't know the story. So that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough. It's just it's amazing to think about. Like if Earl doesn't push him and he doesn't become the competitor, is Tiger a really good player? But then say, I'm not really into this. I got burnout because I don't really care. I've won. Yeah, you hit two or you win maybe a major or two, and maybe he falls away in the history of golf, or something else maybe happens, or maybe he gets another interest if he has a normal childhood. Maybe he finishes at Stanford. I mean, who knows? knows what happens? But it's certainly interesting to look at. Going back, I love talking historical stuff with you, Joey, as you know. What do you consider your best win?
Mike, I can't because there are only 7. I can tell you why. Winning the first one is always the first one, and that was Greensboro for me in '85, and it was the week before the Masters, and I was expecting to go home, so I flew home and got fresh clothes and flew back to Augusta and walked on the first tee, and there stood Jack Nicklaus, and to a young Horseheads, New York person who went to Ohio State to see, the king of the Buckeye Kingdom standing there by himself, except for the 5,000 spectators, and got my first tour of Augusta National with him. I mean, what a series of days that was.
Wow.
My next couple wins were the BC Open, local.
Yep.
I mean, and one of them was with my dad on carrying the golf bag. So,
wow.
How do you do that? And then in the middle, I won the International, was the Honda, in the 85 was Honda, 87 the International, which is probably the biggest for me at the time. Then I went into a slump, but in 91 at Quad Cities, which is now the John Deere Classic. So that felt great because, when you're a golfer in a slump, you never think it's going to end. And then 14 years later was Wachovia, which clearly was the biggest. And my boys, it was the first, my boys were born in 90 and 93, and it was the first tournament they knew they watched. They could see that I won. They used to pick on me that my trophies, I went down and bought them at the sporting goods store. And so to win Wachovia, and with all of, with Tiger and Phil and Sergio and all of them there, that was just a monster win. So those were my 7, and they were all so different that it's just hard to pick a favorite.
Yeah, that Wachovia, that was a great. I remember that one like it was yesterday. That was awesome. That win was so terrific. The BC Open, the second one, you were shooting some daggers, man. 65, 63, the first 2 rounds. You were on fire right out of the gate.
Yeah, but let me tell you a little story about that. So, yes, the middle 30 holes might have been the most under par I've ever been. I don't even know the numbers, but it got dumb. But a lot of guys have shot, some reason Enjoy lends itself to that. But I will tell you, if I remember correctly, I could be off by 1 shot. I stood on the first tee the last day, leading by 6, paired with Jeff Sluman, and then I think it was a couple of shots behind him. So unless I folded the tent or something wild happened, it was me and Jeff. I will tell you, so on number 1, there's water on the left, and I was playing safe to the middle of the green, my second shot. It was only a 9-iron or wedge, and I pulled it left directly at the pin and birdied it. So I went up 7 after the first hole with 17 to play. Jeff Sluman played one of the most stunning rounds of golf I've ever seen in my life. I think he hit all the par 5s in 2. Now remember, we were hitting 3 woods at those par 5s back then, but he did it. He could have shot 62. He didn't clean the round up very well, and I mean, by mistake, he shot like 68 or something like that. I mean, he could have won that tournament. So even though it seemed like a waltz, it was not over until I got past that last water hazard on number 18, I think.
You mentioned the Honda. I have it down as in 88.
Yes. Sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah, and in the end, you were trying to oust some guys, including Payne Stewart. What did you learn from Payne Stewart?
Payne was incredibly fun. Very, very gifted obviously as a golfer. I mean, he's big for our day, for back then, I'm guessing 6 foot, 6'1", which again, that's not even big-ish anymore for the modern guys. But, if you think back to what they always said the model was with Nicklaus, it was kind of that 5'10", 5'11" thing. Taller people might have a hard time timing up the golf swing and all, whatever we were taught back in the 70s. And so Payne was a big, strong guy with a beautiful golf swing. Fabulous, fabulous competitor. He showed up to win. I'll never forget that whenever anybody says Payne Stewart to me, one day, I was known for always being late. I was zooming across the putting green going to the first tee in a hurry, and he had a set of fake teeth, and they were just not fake enough that you couldn't tell that if something happened to him. And he walked up to me and gave me a big smile, and it was so close to real but so horrific, I didn't even know what to do. And I was like, high pain, kept on walking, and I mean, the whole putting green exploded. I mean, he was a practical joker, and great for the game of golf.
Oh, man, I used to love watching him play. The style, I mean, he had everything. He had size, substance, style. That Open where he edged Phil in '99 was spectacular. It was at Pinehurst, I believe, right?
Yes, so, it was.
Just amazing.
I used to always wonder, because he had that NFL, his clothing had the NFL logo on it, but it was the knickers, and he wore the bright team colors and the Hogan cap. And my caddy John Buckner and I used to always say, remember this was back in the 80s, and we'd say, not that I don't go there now, we'd say, what do you do when you go to McDonald's dressed like that after the round? What exactly happens there? So that was our big giggle. But a great guy.
Golfer Joey Sindelar with us, ML Sports Platter. A couple more on the golf side, Joey. Then we'll get right into some Syracuse basketball talk with a topic that you'll love.
Good.
So you've been around the game for a long time. I mean, you have a couple of amateur wins. You mentioned your 7 professional, or PGA, 9 total, I believe. And then you've got, a very good understanding of the game and the growth. You mentioned 60s, 70s, what you were taught. You go into the amateur ranks, you go into the pro ranks, and you see the explosion of golf internationally, the global impact. We mentioned Tiger, and just guys are coming from all over the place, for crying out loud. I mean, Seve started a lot of it, obviously, over in Europe. You got Northern Ireland, you've got Padre Carrington, and then you've got Rory McIlroy, Darren Clark, all that whole area. Japan is enormous in golf, and I think in '85 in that Greater Greensboro, you edged out Aoki in that one, right? And he's from Japan.
Yep.
What does Matsuyama? This is what I'm getting to. Is this year he wins the Masters, Hideki Matsuyama? What happens now for him? By winning that green jacket, what happens for golf? That another global explosion I can imagine here, especially in the Far East, right?
Well, I think it's yes, but I think it's kind of on fire already. And because remember, starting with the Ozakis, Jumbo, Jet, and Joe, the 3 brothers back in the '80s, the oldest of them, like in Nicklaus's later years, they're the ones that kind of originally exploded it into Aoki right around that whole time.
Sure. My
partner at the team championship was Tommy Nakajima, one of the most fabulous golf swings I've ever seen in my life, and what a fun guy he was. So yes, Matsuyama, I heard somebody say it was probably $1 billion win.
Yeah.
I believe it. I've been over there a lot. You are him doing that. He is now, he's not Tiger Woods. Of course, nobody is that, but whatever, draw the equivalent to every single person in Japan will know who he is, and it's stunning what he did. It is a lull right now for the Japanese players, at least the ones that have made it to the States, but the game is big there. They love the game of golf, but I mean, look at the names that are happening on our tour, and the women's tour have been, for the Southeast Asian players, have been in for 15 years now, and they're awesome, and they're driven and well rehearsed, and it's golf is now worldwide. Where again, when I was on the tour, that was a big part. Just to let you know, the whole appearance fee thing, back in the '80s, our tour, the PGA Tour, it was always forbidden for any sponsor to be pay or be tied to appearance fees, because they wanted the entire purse. They wanted all of the money to go into the purse to be played for by everybody. Yeah. But because they had so few great players, although that group of the European, Langer, who was it? Langer, Faldo, Lyle, and then Norman from Australia, Ian Woosnam, that 5 or 6 that are basically my age, those were stunning golfers. But we used to, whenever you won a tournament, like if you won the Masters, let's say not now, because I can't even begin to tell you the numbers now, but let's say back in the 80s or even in the 90s, if you won a major, any of them, you could pretty much take any week you wanted and go overseas, and it would be, I'm guessing, I mean, of course I never won a major, but I'm going to say $100,000 to $200,000 a week, at least 100, plus expenses, plus the whole deal, as many times as you wanted to go. And so multiply, take that from 35 years ago and bring that forward. it's stunning. So it could easily be $1 billion. He seems like a very nice guy. I listened for the undertones of the conversation during the tournament, and I loved hearing that the other players like him, and I loved that a couple of them stuck around to congratulate him and looked like they felt great about doing it. It's fun when nice people win those things, and on top of it, he's really good. So we should be seeing more of him.
Did you ever experience, whether it was years ago, just starting, middle of your career, recently, burnout and say, to hell with this? Like, God, I'm good. I mean, God, I can't. You're hitting thousands and thousands of balls every day. You become robotic, habitual, mechanical, whatever the word is. Did you ever experience burnout to the point where you were like, man, I don't know about this anymore?
I never got that far. I think, it's fatiguing, and it's fatiguing in different ways because it's personality based. They used to make fun of me on the tour. We had Dallas and Fort Worth next to each other, back to back, 2 separate weeks for all those 25 years. And I would come home in between, and they would laugh and go, "What are you doing? We're already here." And I'd say, "I gotta go. I'm a homebody. I gotta go." And now I have those very same people coming up to me going, "Man, now we know what you were doing." So,
yeah.
Although luckily for me, I had a hand injury. I had 2 injuries. Why am I blanking on one? But I had a hand surgery, a broken hook of hamate, which, as you may know, many of the baseball players break in the pad of the left hand for a right-handed golfer. And I missed 6 or 8 weeks, maybe even a little bit more than that. At a time, it seems to happen to when family starts, and it's like, what are we doing? I'm not seeing the kids grow up, and when you leave, they're upset. Dad, where you going? What's going on? And at least for me, that's what it looked like. And I know for many others, the story was the same. So luckily, my injury occurred at a time where it kind of slapped me in the face and said, "Yep, there's some hard parts to what you're doing, but look what look what this is, and if you're good enough to stay, what in the heck are you doing?" And so I was able to have a nice little wake-up call right when I needed it with a couple of those injuries.
All right, finally, the Syracuse basketball scene. I know you were probably going nuts again this year. They figured out a way to get in the tournament. A couple of big wins down the stretch. Carolina, Clemson. Stop me if you've heard this before, by the way. Couple of huge wins down the stretch. You just get in, you see what happens. All the matchups are favorable. They win 2, and they're in the Sweet 16. I mean, it's so classic Syracuse. I was arguing with a ton of Syracuse fans, and I try to stay away from making a comment because then on social media it never ends, right? So you just keep getting notifications, the conversation keeps going, and it just becomes exhausting at some point. But I was trying to argue, and some of these people are my friends, I was trying to argue with these people my point in that, guys, this particular group, Joey, was complaining that Syracuse, all regular season, there's a part of the fan base. The games pass Jimmy by. The 2-3 zone, it doesn't work. It's an old stale defense. The offense is brutal, and it's an ISO. You can't compete in the ACC. You've been mediocre. You're on the bubble every year. And I go, hold on a minute. Does it really matter in the regular season when all those things are going on if you've made the Sweet 16 in 21 and 18 and 16 at Final Four in 2013 and 16? You've made multiple Elite Eights. Since this mediocre talk and all those things that I mentioned that people are complaining about, since that stuff has come to the forefront, Syracuse is successful still in March. So what does it matter if you're finishing the way you do? Which way do you sit?
Well, I know that the current measuring stick is the big dance, and then of course the tournament, the league championship before that, and then the league before that. And sure, it would be nice to have it both ways. When I watch, I try to have faith in our leader Jim, that he knows what he's doing. We've had a lot of moving parts. The zone. When I listen to him critique when he really gets angry, not to me, but even in the press interviews, or when the steam finally bubbles over, and I hear the comments about so and so didn't get there, and then I go rewatch. It is pretty nuanced stuff that they're doing, and when players are in now for only a year or two, I'm betting it takes a lot longer to do what they need to do, and maybe they are just better at the end of the year. I don't know. It's been such an amoeba these last bunch of years with, a couple of great players leaving way early, a year or two earlier than we expected, or maybe an injury, or the blend was odd, or, I don't know the reasons, but in the end, he gets them there, and I don't know. It's a tough. I can understand a lot of the points of the story, and then on top of all that, this new transfer stuff, which I have a question for you. So to answer your question, yeah, I'd like him to win a league championship, and I think certainly they will. I think it's just been an odd, quirky bunch ever since the penalties. How long ago are the penalties now? Like 5 or 6 years?
Yeah,
7 years?
they're a ways back now. Yeah,
you're right. So that kind of started this unrest, and then again a couple. Who was the? Why am I blanking? I'm over 60 now. Forgive me. The point guard from Canada that left early and made it in the NBA.
Yeah, Tyler Ennis.
Tyler Ennis, absolutely. Yeah. So nobody expected him to,
and really Jeremy Grant too. He left
Grant,
right away. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So son of a gun. I have a question for you, Mike. Is this new transfer and play right away thing? Is this a going forward rule, or is this a this year rule?
Well, right now it's in place. I mean, I think they've really got to reevaluate this thing because there's 1,400 as we talk players in the transfer portal, and I mean that's like 35 to 40% of all players in Division I, which is absurd. I know Dick Vitale's been barking up the tree to change this, and he's right. I think he's spot on. It's too many players. It's too much movement. It's some guys are, and I'm not saying everybody's doing this, but there is some sort of, well, you know what, I'm not happy here for a year. Like, where's the loyalty? Where's the you're giving up, and I know sometimes people need change, and that's fine. I don't care if you're 18 or 68, you need change, but there's just too many. I mean, it's just way too many. And
is it, Mike, is it too many because it's the first year, so there are effectively 4 classes of people, and it'll settle down as it becomes, because next year it'll be 3 years, sooner or later it'll just be the new people that have the chance to do it.
See, this type of thing, I mean, not that the transfer portal's been around for, 5 years, let's say, but the grad transfer rule and some of these other things that have gone on have sort of, I think, pushed us into, the NCAA and the approval of the transfer portal. And so now you have all of these players just being like, I'm going to go to this school and it didn't work out for a year. I'm going to bounce to this school and I'm going to go get re-recruited again. And, there's a lot of shady stuff going on behind the scenes too with, guys being told by certain coaches that, hey, you can come here because I know another guy's getting out of here who I don't like, who I'm forcing out or whatever. So there's a lot of garbage going on. And yeah, you're talking about 5-6 years now with that with 2015 with those sanctions. So that it goes back to that a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, listen, if you want to go 90 wins and win a wild card, but win the World Series, or you're an 8 seed and you finished in the middle of the pack in your conference. You get into March, you get hot on the biggest stage, and you go to a Final Four. I don't know. I think Syracuse fans are worrying too much about a few different things in the regular season that really just don't matter.
Yep. Just look, here we are in Central New York State. We have such an awesome product. I hate to just be the shiny glasses side of the deal, but I love them, and I'm happy they're here, and it thrills me to cheer for them, football and basketball.
Joey Sindelar, thanks so much. Great catching up with you.
Mike, a pleasure. Always nice to hear your voice, and thanks for the great job you do.
The ML Sports Platter brought to you by Stanley Law Offices, Bryant and Stratton College, and my good buddy Brian Comboy of Mass Mutual New York State. Go ahead and log on to advisors.massmutual.com. Brian, getting your financial future in place. Boy, we are super excited what Brian opened our eyes to in the financial future world, getting set no matter what. Retirement could be a youngster going off to college. Get your financial future in order today with Brian Comboy of Mass Mutual New York State, the official financial advisor of the ML Sports Platter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and advisors.massmutual.com. Speaking of Syracuse basketball talk with Joey Sindelar, let's get into a little bit more of it with the beat man and insider for the Orange, for the Athletic. It's my good buddy Matthew Gutierrez on Twitter at Matthew Gut, the number 21, and make sure you follow The Athletic as well, at The Athletic, and get your subscription, theathletic.com. It's terrific writing, amazing content throughout the country, all the markets, college, pros, you name it. Get your subscription now with The Athletic, theathletic.com. And by the way, college basketball, they've got some 5-star team of writers, Dana O'Neill, Seth Davis, and I'm here to tell you that Matthew's one of those guys too. He's doing an unbelievable job. Matthew Gutierrez, what's up, buddy? How are you?
Mike, always a blast to connect. Thanks so much for having me on.
So I want to start with the Dick Vitale video on Instagram. You would send it to me, and I watched it, and he's really irate about the transfer portal. I got to tell you, Matthew, I don't blame him. It's getting out of control.
For sure. I mean, look, he's posted that a number of times. He's said that in several interviews. He's certainly not alone. Some coaches have been outspoken. And look, I'm here to, certainly advocate for players and what they want, right? We've been doing that for years, and if it means they get to transfer as they will, they can. But certainly the system in place right now has been has made for something a little bit out of hand here. We got so much movement for these coaches, and so much going on, and not to forget, Mike, in a few months, someone can enter the portal. So this is not just like a spring thing, and then we'll move on. I mean, the guys can enter the portal. They can bounce around anytime they want. Coaches can recruit against each other. Basically, it's against the rules, but they'll recruit against each other. They'll know someone might not be happy, and they'll start talking to a player even though he's on another team. So it's just on a huge scale right now, and I don't know what the answer is tomorrow, but there's just a lot of movement, and it'll be interesting to see long term. I don't want to jump to the conclusion that it will be horrible long term, but it doesn't look great. It's really going to be difficult for teams and players to develop if they're bouncing around so much.
So you had an awesome piece in The Athletic, which I just recently read on the rotation with Syracuse and how it could pan out. With a lot of guys, the 4 outgoing transfers, a graduation, 3 incoming transfers, and a freshman. So there's so much, speaking of the word movement, right? I mean, is there any program that's more prototypical based on what we're talking about right now off the shoot here than Syracuse? You've got, obviously, Joe Girard, Buddy Boeheim, those are kind of the guarantees here. Barama Sidibe. But then from there, depending on how things work and how good people are, and guys coming in, we could have a couple different scenarios here, right, Matthew, for starters and then bench. So lay it all out.
Yeah, for sure. And, hats off to you again. You pronounce Syracuse names, which haven't been all that easy the last few years. You pronounce them probably better than anybody else.
Barama Sidibe. Merrick Dolajai. Yeah, you got to go listen. When you're a public address announcer, you got to spell it out. You got to be careful. You get wild names, and it's not, if somebody's name is Amitha, let's say, you write it out as UH, me, M-E, and then THUH, and then you keep saying it over and over again until you can't forget it, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's important to get these names right because there's a lot out there that it's the names aren't pronounced correctly, and that's no fun. And it's not good to be hearing different pronunciations of the same person when they're a senior. It's not like they're a newcomer. But anyway, with the rotation, you're looking at Buddy Boeheim and Joseph Girard returning in the backcourt, probably going to be playing a ton of minutes, upwards of 30 to 35, especially with Kadari Richmond out of the mix. Then forward's going to be an interesting spot because Quincy Guerrier is to be decided. Yeah. I tend to think he'll be out. He's especially what O'Shea Brissett is doing, going the undrafted route after his sophomore year. Isn't the end of the world. He went undrafted. He grinded in the G League, really worked on his three-point shot, which he didn't improve at Syracuse, but he improved it in the pros. And here he is now signing a 3-year deal with Indiana, making a nice, paycheck there. So I think Quincy could do that, but regardless, let's just assume he's gonna be out for the first part of this. I would say Benny Williams, 5-star freshman, comes in to start at the 3. Jimmy Boeheim, Cornell forward, starts at the 4, and then Barama Sidibe will split some time with Jesse Edwards at the 5 if Barama is healthy and can go. Now, if Quincy's back, obviously Quincy will start at the 4. Jimmy would come off the bench with Cole Swider, 2 forwards, who are not all that athletic, but can help you offensively and are going to be probably smart players. So with this roster, with this rotation, I think a couple things. One, I think they're going to score like they have the last 2 years. They're going to shoot the ball pretty well, especially if Buddy and Joe can play at the level they're capable of. But the one concern is going to be the defense. Again, just not the most athletic team in the ACC. They're really going to have to be smart defensively because they don't have the speed and quickness that some other teams will. Obviously, a team like a Houston, for example, those are few and far between, but a team like that could really give this Syracuse team some trouble.
Okay, how good is Benny Williams?
It's a tough one. This is a really good question. Look, I've texted with some people, some former managers, player, a couple high school folks down at IMG, and I've gotten some wide-ranging results. We've gotten comparisons to former Syracuse stars, and I've also gotten some concern from a couple people that he might be a nice piece, but certainly not a one and done or even a two and done player. I'm probably somewhere in the middle of that. I think he's going to help them right away. I think he'll be an impact player at the forward spot. I think he'll be athletic. I could see him going for around 8-9 points a game as a freshman, maybe 10 tops, 5 or 6 boards in about 20 to 30 minutes is kind of where my expectation is with Benny. And if he's going to exceed that, tip your cap to him. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't think he's going to be, an absolute star right away. And I just say that not so much as a slight to him, but just because of how hard it is to come in as a freshman and impact the game at a high level. It's really challenging. And this is a Syracuse team that's going to have some experience. So he won't need to be a star offensively. They do have some scoring. Obviously, Buddy Boeheim is back after a really good last few weeks of his junior season. So there are some pieces here for Benny, I think, to slowly carve out a role. He doesn't have to come in and be a star.
Matthew Gutierrez, the Athletic Syracuse basketball insider, beat man. Go get him on Twitter at MatthewGUT, the number 21, and obviously just 35 followers away from 5,000. We got to get you to the number. So if you're listening out there, help out Matthew and follow him. Just a terrific follow. So for years and years and years, people have been trying to guess when Jim Boeheim's going to retire, right? And I've always told people it's pointless because he's just going to keep coaching until he literally physically doesn't feel like it, and he's admitted that. However, if I painted you this picture, Jim Boeheim with now Buddy Boeheim and Jimmy Boeheim, if they were to go to a Final Four this year, it's possible. We could go through 500 season mediocrity, and we'll get to that in a little bit too, by the way. All the things that we talk about, all the things that Syracuse fans complain about during the regular season, then the switch flips, the matchups work, the zone work, Jimmy knows March, the players get better. Offensively, something happens where guys come out of this cocoon and they perform, and all of a sudden they land in the Sweet 16 again or beyond. If that were to happen this year, could you see a scenario where Jim might go, hey, it won't get better than this and I am going to step away?
No.
Me either. I don't think so either. Yeah.
How you preface the question, I mean, you're spot on. It's like you get asked it a bunch. Obviously, a lot of people, it's a topic of discussion. I get asked it at restaurants, in Syracuse, especially before the pandemic. Oh, you talked to him. When do you think he's going to retire? Blah, blah, blah. To your point, it's going to be something that he does as long as he's healthy and able to do it. He's going to do it. So that could mean more than 5 years from now. It really could, and that's not even an exaggeration.
Unbelievable.
It's just, and it's he's given every indication too, that he will coach as long as he's healthy. He doesn't want age to play a role, ageism basically, and doesn't want it to play a role in him bouncing or retiring. So, I mean, look, I don't see Jim just retiring 10 minutes away from SU, playing golf and not having a ton of care for how the team does, right? I think this is him. This is who he is. This has been his whole life, and therefore, I think this is just something that he will continue to do long after his sons leave the program.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how time's flown already, right? Buddy's going into his senior year, right? I mean, that's already. We're already here. Jimmy Boeheim's already done with his Cornell time. I mean, Jimmy's daughter's close to graduating, probably, right, from U of R. I think she's going to be a senior too, because she and Buddy are twins, isn't that right?
Yeah, she's an upperclassman. Yep.
Yeah, so exactly. So here we are, fast forwarding. And yet we're still talking about a possibility that this guy could coach 50 years before he's done at Syracuse. I don't see him stepping away at all. I really don't. Even after this year, they could go to a Final Four. Jimmy and Buddy there. They have the whole senior day at the Dome, and Jim. Okay, cool. I'm ready for next year. I could see it for sure. The final thing, a piece of this though, that's interesting, and then I'll let you go, is the 1,000 win mark. We know right now he's at 982 with the asterisk. He should have. I think the NCAA should give him back the wins, considering they've let all the other programs off the hook, especially with the Adidas thing. The 1,000 win thing, if people don't believe he wants that, you're kidding yourself. He's got as much of an ego as anybody. He wants those 1,000 wins. That could play into it too. Do you think he probably gets that number this year too? That's another layer.
Yeah, for sure. So he'll get the official, quote unquote, official 1,000 this year, I would assume, right? I mean, look, you look at their past two seasons, by any means, but by all means, they've been, very mediocre in the ACC and not kind of what program expectations are. That said, they've won 18 games each of the last 2 years. So they're going to get their non-conference wins. They're going to get their Cornells and Colgates, and then they're going to go probably 500 in the ACC at worst, right, this season, even if they're having a so-so season again. So they're still going to get those 18 to 20 wins, I'd imagine. And they're going to have a longer schedule, right? This past year was obviously shorter, slightly by COVID, had a few cancellations as well. So, yeah, I think he'll be right around 1,000 to 1,005 after this season. I think Buddy will have a decision to make, whether it's, depending on how he does, of course, if he can shoot 40% from three, I think he goes to the league, or at least, tries as a second rounder. I do think that's legit. Even a couple NBA scouts had inquired about him to a couple colleagues, and I was just texting with one who said he's on their radar for sure for next year's draft. As a shooter, they're obviously a little concerned with the defensive limitations and his athleticism, but hey, look, if you can shoot the ball 40 to 50% from three really consistently, and Buddy knows he has to improve on that, but if he can get there, you can carve out minutes in that league, right? Shooting is in such high demand the last 2 years, and I think it'll only continue that way. But yes, to your point, I think there's some milestones Jim wants. That's certainly the 1,000. I think he probably wants another Final Four, perhaps another national championship. Obviously, the title, as we've texted before with Gonzaga and others, it's a crapshoot. You can be so good and have one off 5-minute run in the Final Four and you're out. It's not the best team necessarily. It's the hottest team, and so that's a little bit tricky to predict. But a Final Four is much more realistic, especially to your point. The way this team plays, just sort of floating around 500 every regular season, the past 6-7 years now. And then just making these surprise runs. And you hit the nail on the head. It's not that complicated. It's the novelty of the zone. They've gotten some really favorable matchups, especially in early round games with these runs, notably, San Diego State being completely lost against the zone. A couple of years ago, Michigan State loses early. So they've gotten these nice paths. They've also, they've done the work though. The zone has been really good really good, and then there's usually that one or two players who just becomes some star we haven't seen for months, right? Whether it's Malachi popping out or obviously Buddy.
Yeah, they produce their own One Shining Moment video themselves, you know?
Yeah. It's it's maybe a topic for another day, Mike. We've talked about it. It's like, the fans, do you want the mediocre regular seasons and then the Sweet 16, the great 2 weeks,
right?
Or would you prefer more consistency in the regular season, but maybe earlier exits in the tournament? It's, obviously you'd like both, right? Good regular season and a deep run, but it's just something to consider, and I think fans kind of fall on both sides of that spectrum. But it does seem like fans really enjoy those 2 weeks, almost make up for 3 months of winning when you think they're going to lose and losing when you think they're going to win, sort of deal.
Yeah, and that's, I was going to lay that into the back end of this as well. I mean, you think about 2013-14, that team started 25-0. Ennis hits the buzzer beater at Pittsburgh. It's a crazy time. They're number one. Central New York's losing its mind, and then you go to Buffalo where you have a slight home court advantage. You lose in the second round to Dayton. Do you want that situation, or do you want mediocrity in the ACC, competitive games against Duke, here and there, knock them off? Okay, recruiting's a little bit down. Okay, the ISO offense is, here we go again. It's just they don't even run anything. The game's passing Boeheim by. The 2-3 zone's getting lit up 7-8 times a year. Okay, but then you get a 10 seed and you show up in the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final 4. I mean, come on. I would much rather have the latter every single time. Every time.
Yeah, that's what most people would say, right? I mean, it's the tournament that really matters. It's what people remember. It's the recency. It's the recency bias. It's what you remember. Like, you ask how a team did, and people say, "Oh, that was a Sweet 16 team." You don't necessarily say it was a 500 team that was looking at the NIT until the last 2 weeks, right? No one really says it that way. So, to their credit, they've tacked on. This is Boeheim. That was Boeheim's 20th Sweet 16. And going back earlier, I mean, it's an interesting topic, but as he has said, even at the Zoom in the Sweet 16, I believe it was, he was asked about retirement. He referenced Warren Buffett and said, Warren's I think he's 90, 91.
Yeah, I heard that.
And he basically said, if Warren has a sharp mind, he can do it. I don't need to be, athletic. I just have to have a mind and be able to talk, was the phrasing he said. So, hey, look, if someone wants to go bet that Coach Boeheim might be coaching for 10 to 15 more years, I certainly would not look at them as if they're crazy, because I think that's somewhat reasonable.
I do too. At Matthew Gut, the number 21, the Athletic Syracuse men's basketball insider and beatman, theathletic.com. Get your subscription today as well. Make sure you read Matthew Gutierrez. Thanks a lot, pal. Appreciate it.
Mike, always a blast. Thank you so much. Stay warm up there, okay? You're putting yourself through those, not only Central New York winters, but Central New York springs now.
Yeah, well, it's what, there's 2 seasons. There's 2 seasons, pal. It's summer for 2 months and it's winter for 10. So that's where we're at. And the older you get, you lose the circulation. So I'm not a good fit in this place anymore. But thanks so much.
Thank you, man.
The ML Sports Platter, Spotify, Google, Apple, Stitcher, Deezer, anywhere else. Download, subscribe, leave feedback, and a 5-star review. Huge thanks to Joey Sindelar and Matthew Gutierrez. I'm Mike Lindsley, the ML Sports Platter, a part of the Brawl Network. Get me on Twitter at Mike L Sports. And a big tip of the cap thank you to the Al and Angus Pub, Sit Mean Sit Syracuse, CNY Electrical, and Ken's Auto Detailing, Route 11 in Cicero. If you're in and around Central New York, the best car details around, inside, outside, wax and wash, you name it. Ken's Auto Detailing, a proud ML Sports Platter sponsor, and a big thank you for the support from the Whitaker and Swan families as well. As I always tell you, enjoy the games.